James stepped off the transport shuttle, his gaze sweeping across the bustling interiors of the interstellar diplomatic station. The hum of conversation blended with the whirring of machinery and the distant echoes of announcements in a dozen languages. It was a hub for diplomats, traders, and various species from across the galaxy, each corner of the station bursting with the potential for new alliances and exchanges. As he adjusted the strap of his bag, a man approached him, his uniform crisp, his smile welcoming. "Mr. James Archer, I'm Liam, your liaison officer. Welcome to the Sigma station." James shook Liam's hand, appreciating the firmness of his grip. "Thank you, Liam. It's good to finally be here. The journey was longer than I expected. Space travel can often be unpredictable, but I assure you, everything here is designed to make your stay as comfortable as possible," Liam replied, leading James through the corridors. "Your first briefing is tomorrow. Today you can settle in." They arrived at a living quarters section reserved for human diplomats. Liam punched in a code on a panel beside one of the doors. "This will be your room. I hope you find it to your liking." The door slid open, revealing a modest but well-equipped suite. Before Liam could offer a tour, another figure appeared, slightly shorter, with glistening blue skin and an array of delicate fins trailing from her head and down her neck. She wore a simple uniform, denoting her role as one of the station's many service staff. "Mr. Archer, this is Mira," Liam introduced. "She'll be looking after your quarters. Mira, anything he needs, make sure it's taken care of." Mira nodded, her voice soft yet clear. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Archer. If you need anything or have questions about the station, please feel free to ask." "Thank you, Mira," James responded, his curiosity piqued by her unique appearance. "I'm sure I'll have many questions soon enough." And Liam excused himself, leaving James with Mira. "Would you like a moment to refresh yourself, or shall I show you around the room first?" Mira asked, gesturing to the small sitting area and the adjacent bedroom. "The tour would be great. Thank you," James said, setting his bag down. As Mira walked him through the quarters, explaining various controls and amenities, James noticed how her movements were graceful, almost like swimming through the air. "Where are you from, Mira? I don't recognize your species," James ventured, hoping he wasn't being too forward. "I'm from Aquaria, a water planet in the Vesper system. We are quite adapted to aquatic life, but I've learned to manage just as well in environments like these," Mira explained, her fins subtly shifting colors as she spoke. "That must be quite a change for you," James Ryu, genuinely interested. "It was challenging at first, but I enjoy learning about other cultures. It helps that water is universal. It makes this station feel a little more like home," Mira said with a smile that uttered rise. As she showed him how to operate the environmental controls to adjust humidity, a must for her comfort, James found himself fascinated by her adaptability and knowledge. "And what brings an Aquarian to a place like this?" he inquired. "To understand and to be understood," Mira replied earnestly. "I believe that's the essence of why anyone comes to Sigma Station, isn't it?" James nodded, impressed by her insight. "You're right, and I hope to do plenty of both." As Myra finished the tour, she turned to leave but then paused at the doorway. "Mr. Archer, if you need to adjust the settings further to be more comfortable, or if you just want to learn more about Aquaria, please let me know. I'm here to assist in any way." "Actually, Mira, there is something," James began, recalling the protocol briefing he'd skimmed on the shuttle. "I read that personal exchanges are encouraged here for better cultural understanding. Maybe you could join me for a meal sometime. Tell me more about your world." Mira's fins fluttered in what James took to be a sign of pleasure. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Archer. I'll look forward to it." As she left, James felt a gentle thrill of anticipation. This posting might be more interesting than he had initially thought. Here, far from Earth, surrounded by the unknown, he could sense the beginning of something transformative. The next morning, James was slowly adapting to the rhythms of Sigma Station, its bustling hallways a stark contrast to the quiet, ordered life he'd left behind on Earth. As he unpacked the last of his belongings, a chime signaled someone at the door. It slid open to reveal Mira, her tray laden with what looked like breakfast. "Good morning, Mr. Archer. I brought you some standard station fare to start your day," Mira said, setting the tray on the table. James smiled. "Thanks, Mira. Please, just call me James. Mr. Archer makes me feel like I'm back at a military briefing. All right, James, Mira replied, her fins shimmering lightly with a hue of amusement. I hope you find the food to your liking. I included a few items from Aquaria. As well, I thought you might enjoy trying something new. As James sampled a gelatinous, sweet-tasting fruit, another knock came. This time it was a man in an engineer's uniform. Morning, James. I'm Carl, the tech specialist. Liam told me you had some questions about the communication setup here. Yes, thanks for coming by, Carl. James welcomed him in. I'm trying to figure out how I can secure a line back to Earth that doesn't lag too much. Carl nodded, setting up his tools. Let's take a look at your console. The lag is usually minimal unless there's a solar flare disrupting signals. Mira watched curiously as Carl worked, her expression one of keen interest. Is it difficult, managing all these different technologies from various species? She asked. It's a challenge, but that's what makes it fun, Carl responded without looking up. Each species brings something unique to the table, so to speak. It keeps us on our toes. James, intrigued by the interaction, proposed an idea. Mira, maybe Carl could use an assistant today. It sounds like a great way to learn more about each other's work. What do you think? Mira's eyes lit up. I'd like that very much. I have some free time today. Carl glanced up, a grin spreading across his face. Sure, I could use the help. And I'm curious about Aquarian tech. Heard it's quite advanced in bioengineering and water filtration. As Carl showed Mira how to trace the network cables and check connectivity, James observed, appreciating the easy camaraderie that formed between them. It wasn't long before Mira adeptly followed Carl's instructions, her delicate fingers surprisingly adept at manipulating the tools. The morning passed with productive bustle, and just as they were finishing up, a sudden splashing sound interrupted the quiet concentration. Mira had accidentally knocked over a water container with her fine, drenching herself in the floor around. Oh, I'm so sorry. I sometimes forget how much space my fins take up, Mira apologized, her skin turning a slight shade of violet in embarrassment. No harm done, Carl assured her, handing her a towel. But maybe we should get you dried off. Mira looked at James, her expression hesitant. Could you help me? I need to be washed. It was a simple request, but her tone carried an undercurrent of trust that went beyond the words. James was taken aback for a moment, then understanding dawned on him. Of course, Mira. Let's take care of that. Carl excused himself, giving them privacy. James followed Mira to a small utility room where cleaning supplies were kept, including a handheld shower head designed for quick cleanups. As James gently helped rinse the water from Mira's fins, he was careful to be respectful and gentle, conscious of her trust in him. Is this all right? He asked as he adjusted the water temperature to her liking. Yes, that's perfect, thank you, Mira said, her fins relaxing under the warm stream. In Aquaria, water is more than just a necessity, it's a comfort. I'm learning a lot today, not just about station tech, but also about Aquarian customs, James said, feeling a deeper connection forming as they shared this quiet moment. As they finished up, Mira thanked James, her smile warm. I appreciate your help, James. It's not easy being far from home, but kindness like yours makes it a lot easier. Anytime, Mira, James replied, realizing that Sigma Station was quickly starting to feel a lot less like a foreign outpost and more like a community, a place where different worlds and beings could meet and learn from one another in harmony. The incident in the utility room had unexpectedly bridged a gap between James and Mira, making their interactions more relaxed and genuine. Later that evening, as the station's artificial day cycle began to dim into twilight hues, James invited Mira and Carl to join him for dinner at one of the station's communal dining areas, where representatives of different species often mingled. As they approached the dining hall, the smell of a variety of cuisines filled the air, each dish representing a different planet or culture. I thought this would be a good opportunity for all of us to try something out of the ordinary, James explained, leading the way to a table with a view of the star field beyond the station's transparent dome. Carl, ever curious about alien technology, was more interested in the food replicators lining one side of the hall. I've heard some of these machines can produce dishes from over 300 planetary systems. I'm tempted to try something completely alien to me, he mused, scanning the menu options displayed above the replicator. Mira laughed softly. I can recommend a few dishes from Aquaria if you're adventurous enough. Let's make it a surprise, Carl decided, punching in a selection. And what about you, James? Ready to taste the unknown? Absolutely, James replied, choosing at random from the list. They sat down with their trays filled with colorful, oddly shaped food items emitting enticing aromas. As they ate, James turned to Myra. You mentioned earlier that in Aquaria, water is more than a necessity, it's a comfort. Could you explain a bit more? Mira nodded, picking at her food with a utensil perfectly suited for her dexterous, webbed fingers. Water is central to our culture. It's where we live, socialize, and express ourselves. Our cities are built beneath the waves, and our technology is designed to work in harmony with the ocean. That sounds beautiful, Carl commented, genuinely intrigued. And here I thought fixing a water pipe was a chore. Sounds like you might find it meditative. It can be, Mira agreed, especially when the water flows just right. It's akin to how you feel about air, I suppose. You don't think about it much, but it's always there, essential and comforting. The conversation moved smoothly from cultural differences to personal stories. Carl shared anecdotes about growing up on a mining colony in the asteroid belt, where every piece of tech was patched together from whatever was at hand. James talked about his early days in the diplomatic corps, filled with missteps and misunderstandings that now made for humorous tales. As the meal wound down, James noticed how the discussions had not only broadened his understanding, but deepened his appreciation for the station's role as a cross-cultural hub. This place, he mused aloud, is more than just a meeting point. It's a real melting pot of ideas and experiences. Exactly, Carl agreed, pushing his now empty plate away. It's about finding common ground, or at least understanding where there isn't any. Mira's expression grew thoughtful. Do you ever worry, she asked slowly, that we might lose something of ourselves in all this mixing? Our identity. That's a valid concern, James admitted. But I think it's like any relationship. You grow, you change together, and hopefully you find a balance where no one loses their essence. The discussion lingered on this philosophical note as they left the dining hall, the stars shining brightly outside the station's windows. It seemed to James that each star could represent a conversation, a shared moment, or a lesson learned in understanding and cooperation. Thanks for this, James. And Mira, Carl said as they parted ways. I think tonight was a great reminder of why we're out here. Agreed, Mira responded, her finds reflecting the starlight in vibrant patterns. And thank you both for being open to understanding a bit of what makes Aquaria, well, Aquaria. As they said their goodbyes, James felt a profound sense of connection not just to Mira and Carl, but to the vast, diverse universe they were all a part of. It was a comforting thought as he headed back to his quarters, the words and laughter from the evening echoing in his mind, a testament to the power of shared meals and shared stories. The next day, James found himself grappling with the station's unique bureaucracy, a complicated tangle of rules from countless civilizations, all meshed into one procedural nightmare. With a key diplomatic meeting ahead and documents that refused to align with anyone's standards, James knew he needed help. He decided to seek out Liam, who was adept at navigating the labyrinth of interstellar diplomacy. He found Liam in the bustling hub of the administration wing, buried under holoscreens displaying various alien scripts. Liam, got a minute? James asked, approaching his desk. Liam looked up, a trace of relief crossing his features. James, yes, come in. What's on your mind? It's about the preparations for the meeting with the Delpharians. I'm having a hard time reconciling their documentation standards with ours. It's like fitting a square peg in a round hole. Liam chuckled. Welcome to my world, James. Let's see what you've got, and maybe we can untangle it together. As they pored over the documents, Carl passed by, noticed their struggle, and paused. Document woes? Anything I can do to help? James and Liam exchanged a look, and James nodded. Actually, Carl, maybe you could. We're trying to convert some of the files into a format the Delpharians won't reject. Carl pulled up a chair. I love a good tech puzzle. Let's see what we can do. Together, the three men delved into the complexities of intercultural document formatting, a task as diplomatically delicate as it was technically perplexing. Their efforts were occasionally punctuated with good-natured banter and shared frustrations which seemed to lighten the load. While they worked, Mira walked in, her presence instantly noted by her shimmering, moist skin that caught the light of the room. "James, I brought you the updated environmental settings you requested for your quarters, and I see you're busy." "Actually, Mira, glad you're here," James said, smiling up at her. "Could use another pair of eyes, preferably ones that haven't been staring at the screen for the past 3 hours. Mira leaned over to look at the data, her fins subtly shifting colors as she concentrated. "I'm not familiar with Delpharian formats, but I do know a bit about coding. Maybe there's a syntax error we're missing." Together, the group tackled the problem, their collaborative effort a microcosm of the station's greater purpose. Their combined expertise, diplomatic, technical, and otherwise, slowly brought clarity to the chaos. As they finally began to make headway, a voice over the station's PA system announced the upcoming Cultural Exchange Night, an event designed to foster better relationships between the various species and diplomats. "That's our cue," Carl said, stretching his back. "We should wrap this up and head to the event. So maybe take our minds off this for a bit." Liam nodded in agreement. "Good idea. We've done what we can for now, and tonight should be about building bridges, not just sorting paperwork." The group cleaned up their workspace and made their way to the main hall, where the cultural exchange was taking place. The room was vibrantly decorated, filled with music and laughter, and every table boasted artifacts and delicacies from different worlds. As they mingled, James couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment, not just for the progress they'd made on the documents, but for the personal connections that were clearly strengthening. "Seeing all this," James said, gesturing to the room bustling with life and vibrant exchanges, "reminds me why the paperwork is worth it. These events, these interactions, they're what really matter." "True," Mira replied, her eyes reflecting the colorful lights. "It's about understanding each other and respecting our differences enough to work through them, just like we did today." Liam clapped both James and Carl on the back. "Here's to more of this collaboration, understanding, and maybe a bit of fun tonight." As the evening wore on, the group shared stories, sampled foods, and even attempted a few alien dances, their laughter blending into the festive atmosphere. For James, the station had truly begun to feel like a place where diverse paths crossed and new journeys began, all united by a shared mission of peace and understanding. After the cultural exchange event, the station seemed to buzz with a renewed sense of camaraderie and understanding. Capitalizing on this atmosphere, James planned an evening visit to the station's observatory, a place he had yet to explore since his arrival. He invited Carl and Liam to join him, along with Mira, hoping to extend the spirit of connection they'd fostered. As they walked through the quiet corridors towards the observatory, the vastness of space visible through the intermittent viewports lent a contemplative air to their conversation. "Have you guys been here before?" James asked, his voice echoing slightly in the dim hallway. "A few times," Liam replied. "The observatory's view is unbeatable. It's a good place to think or just unwind." Carl nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it's different when you look at space not just as a void but as a place brimming with life and possibilities." They entered the observatory, and the panoramic view of the cosmos took their breath away. A tapestry of stars, planets, and nebulae stretched out before them. The room was designed to offer an unobstructed view of the universe, the darkness punctuated only by the soft lighting from the control panels. Mira moved closer to the glass, her fins reflecting the starlight. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It makes you realize how small some of our problems are." James joined her, watching her face light up with wonder. "It does. Mira, you were going to tell me more about Aquaria. What's it like living under the water?" Mira turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Imagine being surrounded by water in all directions, a world where sound travels faster than light. Our cities glow with bioluminescence, and the water connects everything." "It sounds magical," Carl commented, leaning against a console. "It is, in its way," Mira continued, "but it's not without its challenges. Living underwater means we are always aware of the balance we must maintain with our environment." James listened intently, realizing how little he knew about aquatic worlds. "And what about you, Mira? What brought you here, to the stars? Mira sighed, a slight shimmer passing through her fins. Curiosity, mostly, and a desire to bridge the gap between my world and others, to share and learn, just as we are doing now. The conversation shifted as Liam steered the topic towards their personal histories. Each shared stories from their past. Carl about his first malfunctioning repair on a zero-gravity dock. As they shared, the barriers between them thinned, replaced by the threads of shared experiences and mutual understanding. Isn't it something, Liam mused, how space can make you feel both insignificant and infinite at the same time? It's the paradox of the universe, Carl agreed, pushing off from the console to floatly in the low gravity of the observatory. James laughed, the sound mingling with the soft beeping of the observatory's sensors. We come from different worlds, literally and figuratively. Yet here we are, finding common ground among the stars. Mira smiled at James, her gaze thoughtful and warm. James, your openness to understanding is what makes this all worthwhile. It's comforting to know that no matter where we come from, the desire to connect, to understand, is universal. Their conversation lingered on until the station's cycle signaled the end of the day. Reluctantly, they left the observatory, the images of the cosmos and the echoes of their dialogue lingering in their minds as they each returned to their quarters. James felt a profound sense of peace as he lay down to sleep that night. The vast universe outside his window no longer seemed so daunting or distant. In the shared stories and silent moments of understanding, he found a deep, resonating connection that promised more than just diplomatic success. It suggested a future where understanding bridged the gap between the stars. The sense of connection that had begun to form in the observatory only deepened as the days on Sigma Station passed. One particular evening, after a series of successful meetings that marked a new level of cooperation among the station's diverse inhabitants, James decided to invite Mira for a quiet dinner in his quarters, a place where they could talk more privately. When Mira arrived, James was ready with a simple meal he had prepared himself, an attempt at one of the Aquarian dishes she had described. The room was softly lit, the table set with care. "James, this looks wonderful," Mira said, genuinely touched by his effort. "You've remembered how I described the ingredients." "I tried my best," James replied with a humble smile. "I wanted to show you a bit of your home, as much as I could." As they ate, their conversation meandered from everyday station happenings to deeper, more personal themes. James was curious about Mira's experiences and perspectives, especially how she had adjusted to life among so many different species. "It's been an education," Mira admitted. "Every day brings a new challenge and new insight. It's like learning to swim all over again, in a different current." James laughed softly. "I can imagine, though I've never had to swim in anything much deeper than a pool." "Perhaps I can teach you one day, in the oceans of Aquaria," Mira suggested, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "It's quite different from swimming in a pool." "I'd like that," James said, his tone sincere. The idea of visiting Aquaria, of seeing Mira's world through her eyes, was appealing in a way he hadn't anticipated. Their meal concluded, and Mira helped James clear the table. As they worked side by side, a comfortable silence settled between them, filled with unspoken understandings and shared smiles. Once everything was put away, they moved to the small sitting area of James's quarters. Mira seemed hesitant for a moment, then spoke. "James, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." "What is it?" James encouraged, sensing her uncertainty. "It's about us," Mira began, carefully choosing her words. "These past weeks, getting to know you, it's been more meaningful than I expected. I find myself wondering about us, what this could be." James felt a surge of warmth. He had been feeling the same way but had been unsure how to broach the subject. Mira felt it too. "I think we're discovering something special here, something worth exploring." Mira nodded, her relief palpable. "I'm glad to hear you say that. I wasn't sure if." Before she could finish, James reached out, taking her hand gently. "Mira, there's no certainty in something like this, especially with our different backgrounds. But I want to see where this goes, together with you." Encouraged by his words, Mira moved closer, and in a bold yet tender moment they shared their first kiss. It was a gentle exploration, an affirmation of the feelings they had been cautiously circling. As the kiss deepened, their initial hesitance gave way to a more profound connection. James was acutely aware of every point of contact, the touch of her hand, the feel of her skin. It was as if their very senses were learning a new language, one of touch, of breath, of shared pulses. After a moment, they pulled back slightly, just enough to see each other clearly. "This feels right," Mira whispered, her voice a mix of wonder and conviction. "It does," James agreed, his heart beating fast. "Let's take it one step at a time." As the station spun silently in space, the stars outside the window a distant tapestry of light, James and Mira sat together, their hands entwined, facing the unknown future with a newfound courage that came not from solitude but from unity. The night deepened around them, a soft cocoon of possibilities, as they continued to talk, plan, and dream together. The newfound intimacy between James and Myra did not go unnoticed on the station. In a place where every interaction was observed and often scrutinized, their closeness sparked both curiosity and concern among their peers and superiors. It wasn't long before the consequences of their relationship began to manifest, culminating in a summons for James from the station's head of diplomatic relations, a stern and authoritative figure named Director Stanton. James walked into Stanton's office, a spacious room with a clear view of the docking bays, his nerves taut. Mira, although not summoned, waited outside, her concern evident in the tension of her fins. Director Stanton sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. "James, please take a seat," he gestured to a chair across from him. "We need to discuss an important matter." James sat, his back straight. "Yes, Director Stanton. What seems to be the problem?" Stanton folded his hands, his voice firm. "It's come to my attention that your relationship with one of our service staff, Mira from Aquaria, has become personally involved. You understand the regulations regarding fraternization, especially with non-diplomatic staff." James nodded, his throat tight. "I understand, sir, but I assure you our relationship has not interfered with our professional duties." Stanton raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps not yet, James. But situations like these can complicate interspecies relations and the operational integrity of this station. It sets a precedent we must be cautious of." James collected his thoughts before responding, choosing his words with care. "I respect your concerns, Director. Mira and I have tried to be discreet, and we've kept our personal and professional lives separate. I believe our relationship could even serve as a model of interspecies understanding and respect." Stanton sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Your idealism is commendable, but realism must prevail. I'm asking you to consider the implications of continuing this relationship under the current circumstances." The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime. Liam entered, a file in his hands. "Sorry to interrupt, but you asked for the latest on the Vesper system negotiations." "Thank you, Liam," Stanton said, taking the file but keeping his eyes on James. "See, these are the kind of delicate situations that could be affected by perceptions of favoritism or bias." James felt a surge of frustration but remained calm. "I understand, sir. May I have some time to discuss this with Mira and decide how we wish to proceed?" Stanton nodded, his expression softening slightly. "I'll grant you that, but make your decision quickly. We can't have personal matters overshadowing our larger goals." After leaving the office, James found Mira waiting anxiously. Without speaking, they walked to a quiet corner of the station where they could talk freely. "Mira, the director is concerned about us," James began, his voice low. "He's worried about the implications of our relationship." Mira's fins fluttered with a hint of agitation. "I feared this might happen. James, I don't want to cause you any trouble. Maybe it would be better if—" "No," James interrupted, his decision clear in his tone. "I don't want to hide or rend what we have. It's honest and real. Maybe we need to be open about it, to challenge the norms here." Mira looked at him, her eyes searching his. "That could be risky, for both of us." James took her hands in his. "I know, but I believe in us, Mira. In what we've found together. Let's face this, like we've faced everything else together." Their conversation deepened into the evening, discussing potential outcomes and strategies. They agreed to present a united front, to make a case for their relationship as a positive example of the station's ideals. By the time they parted that night, James and Mira had a plan. They would meet with Stanton together, ready to defend their relationship and to propose that personal connections between species could be a strength, not a weakness, for the station. As James returned to his quarters, he felt a mixture of apprehension and determination. Whatever the outcome, he knew that facing it with Mira was the only way forward. The station, with its myriad lights and shadows, seemed to echo his resolve. The day James and Mira were to meet with Director Stanton again, the station seemed unusually quiet, as if the vast corridors and common areas were holding their breath in emancipation. James met Mira outside Stanton's office, and they exchanged a brief, supportive look before entering together. Director Stanton was already waiting, his expression less stern than before, but still carrying an air of formality. "James, Mira," he greeted them, nodding slightly. "I appreciate you coming to discuss this matter further." "Thank you for hearing us out, Director," James replied as they took their seats across from him. "We believe that what we have is not just personal, but something that can exemplify the ideals of Sigma Station." Stanton leaned forward, interlacing his fingers on the desk. "I'm willing to listen, James. What exactly are you proposing?" Mira spoke up, her voice steady. "We propose a formal recognition of our relationship, not just as a personal bond but as a part of the cultural exchange here at Sigma. Our relationship can serve as a live study, a real-time example of interspecies and intercultural understanding." Stanton considered this, his brow furrowing slightly. "And how would this work, practically speaking? How do you address potential conflicts of interest or accusations of favoritism?" James answered, "We've thought about that. I will report directly to an intermediary for any matters that might present a conflict of interest, ensuring transparency. And we'd like to start a series of workshops and talks about intercultural relationships." Stanton looked from James to Myra, assessing their determined expressions. "It's a bold idea. I'll admit, the potential for positive impact is significant. However, the risk is equally great. If this fails or causes disruption." "We understand the risks," Director James interjected, "but we also believe in the potential. Sigma Station itself was a risk one that has paid dividends in understanding and cooperation across species." Stanton sighed, leaning back in his chair. He was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. I'll approve this on a trial basis. We will need to see concrete plans for those workshops and regular updates on any developments." "Of course, Director," Mira responded, a sense of relief evident in her tone. "Thank you for giving us this chance." Stanton waved them off, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Just make sure you prove me right in taking this risk." As they left the office, James and Myra felt a weight lift off their shoulders. They knew challenges lay ahead, but they were ready to face them together. In the following weeks, they worked tirelessly, organizing workshops that were met with curiosity and enthusiasm by the station's inhabitants. Their relationship, once a subject of whispers and speculation, became a respected symbol of the station's commitment to true understanding and unity. During a quiet moment, overlooking the docking bays as ships came and went, James turned to Mira. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" he asked, his arm around her shoulders. Mira leaned into him, watching a small freighter navigate towards a distant star. "I hoped," she admitted. "But imagining and living it are so different. I'm glad it's with you." James smiled, kissing her forehead. "Me too. Who knows what the future holds, but I know we can handle it together." As they stood together, the vastness of space stretching out before them, the possibilities seemed endless. Sigma Station, once just a place of work, had become a home, a frontier of new beginnings not just for them, but potentially for all who lived and worked there. "James," Mira said suddenly, her voice both serious and playful, "will you come with me to wash in the oceans of my world? I think it's time you learned to swim in deeper waters." Laughing, James squeezed her hand. "I thought you'd never ask. It's a date." Together, they watched the stars, their future as boundless as the universe around them, ready to explore it side by side.